Explorer lost in caves. But when rescuers finally find him, he's sitting beside an unknown woman. Eli Tanner traced his finger along the jagged line that marked the unexplored section of the cave map, his headlamp casting long shadows across the paper. The cool morning air carried the scent of desert sage through his base camp tent as he made final preparations. Outside, the Arizona sun had just begun to paint the rocky landscape gold, but Eli's mind was already deep underground, navigating the darkness that awaited him. "You're sure about going alone?" asked Marco, his research assistant, handing him a freshly calibrated air quality meter. "The company's security has been patrolling more frequently since the protests. I heard they've installed cameras near the south entrance." Eli carefully tucked the device into his waterproof pack. At 42, with salt and pepper stubble and weathered laugh lines that framed determined eyes, he'd spent more time beneath the earth than many spend in their offices. His reputation as the Cavern Whisperer hadn't come from caution, but from an almost supernatural instinct for reading the language of stone and shadow. "That's exactly why I need to go now, Marco." Eli double-checked the satellite tracker on his wrist, the latest model, capable of transmitting from depths that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. Meridian Mining won't wait for environmental impact studies. Once they start blasting next month, those formations are gone forever. He didn't add the personal reason that drove him deeper than scientific curiosity ever could, the memory of his father, who taught him to read cave systems like stories written in stone, claiming this particular system held secrets unlike any other. His father's journals had mapped parts of deep rock that no official survey had ever documented, right before he disappeared during an expedition 20 years ago. The mining lease had awakened an urgency in Eli that transcended conservation. 48 hours, Eli said firmly, shouldering his pack. "If I miss 2 check-ins, you call the team." "But I won't." Marco nodded reluctantly, handing Eli his specialized helmet with its reinforced crown and multiple light sources. "The new batteries should give you 70 hours of continuous light. And the backup systems are tested and ready." Eli finished with a reassuring smile. "This isn't my first dance, Marco. It's your first since Meridian took over." Marco countered, his voice dropping. "And your first since those 3 cavers went missing in the North Branch last year." Eli's expression darkened momentarily. The official report had blamed inexperience and poor equipment for the tragedy, but Eli had his doubts. The victims were competent explorers who'd ventured into an area Meridian had marked for initial surveys. Their bodies were never recovered. "All the more reason to document everything before they destroy it," Eli said, checking the waterproof case containing his high-resolution camera. An hour later, Eli stood at the mouth of the cave, feeling the familiar cool breath of ancient air against his face. Deep rock caverns sprawled beneath the desert for miles, a labyrinth of chambers, tunnels, and underground pools that had formed over millions of years. What made it unique was the unusual mineral composition that created formations found nowhere else on Earth. Delicate crystalline structures that glowed with an almost otherworldly luminescence when properly lit. And now, after decades of protection, deep rock had been leased to Meridian Mining in a controversial deal that environmental groups were still fighting in court. The company claimed they would extract rare earth minerals with minimal impact, but Eli knew better. He'd seen the aftermath of minimal impact, mining in caves across 3 continents. With a final glance at the sun-scorched landscape, Eli activated his tracking beacon and began his descent. The familiar transition from light to dark, from heat to cool, from noise to silence washed over him with each step. This was where he felt most alive, in the space between worlds. 6 hours later, Eli had reached his first checkpoint, the cathedral, a massive chamber where stalactites hung like frozen waterfalls from a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. His headlamp caught flashes of crystal embedded in the limestone, and he paused to capture detailed images, carefully attaching scale markers to document the size and arrangement of the formations. "Checkpoint 1 reached." He spoke into his communication device. "All systems normal, air quality excellent." Proceeding to the Cascade Junction. The response from Marco was faint but clear. "Received. Weather above ground remains stable." No security activity reported near the entrances. Eli continued deeper, following passages that grew narrower as he approached sections that rarely saw human visitors. The geology changed subtly, darker striations in the rock, unusual mineral deposits that his trained eye recognized as scientifically significant. He collected small samples where permitted, carefully recording their locations. At the 14-hour mark, Eli reached the boundary of accurately mapped territory. Beyond this point, the official surveys became vague, marked with question marks and dotted lines. But his father's journal described a network of chambers that housed the most spectacular formations, what he'd called the heart of the mountain. Eli paused to eat a protein bar and check his equipment. The satellite tracker showed his position clearly, its signal bounced to a series of repeaters he'd placed along the way. His oxygen levels were optimal, and his multiple light sources were functioning perfectly. He'd navigated more dangerous situations with far less sophisticated gear. "Beginning exploration of unmapped section," he reported. "If signal weakens, I'll return to this position in 24 hours to re-establish contact." As he ventured beyond the known boundaries, the cave seemed to change character. The passages became more organic, less predictable. Eli found himself squeezing through crevices that suddenly opened into breathtaking chambers, their ceilings adorned with crystal formations that caught his light and scattered it in prismatic patterns across the walls. In one such chamber, Eli discovered what appeared to be ancient pictographs, faded red ochre images that suggested human presence hundreds, perhaps thousands of years earlier. His heart raced as he carefully photographed the findings. This alone would justify protection of the cave system, regardless of what minerals might be extracted from it. 18 hours into his expedition, Eli reached what his father's notes had described as the crossroads, a junction where 5 separate passages diverged. According to the journal, the central passage led to the heart of the system, while the others meandered through lesser chambers before reconnecting. As Eli prepared to enter the central passage, a sound stopped him cold, so faint he might have imagined it. He switched off his headlamp and stood perfectly still in the absolute darkness, listening. There it was again, a whisper of sound, like a distant voice carried on the cave's breath. It seemed to come from the leftmost passage, not the direction his father's map indicated. Eli hesitated. His scientific training and explorer's discipline told him to stick to the plan, to follow the documented route. But something more primal, the same instinct that had saved his life more than once, pulled him toward the unexplained sound. "Slight change of course," he murmured into his communicator, knowing the signal was probably too weak to transmit. "Investigating anomalous acoustic phenomenon in the western branch." With that, Eli Tanner adjusted his headlamp and turned left at the crossroads, moving away from his father's path and toward the whispers that echoed through the ancient stone. The darkness swallowed him as he took step after cautious step, unaware that his 48-hour timeline had already begun to unravel. Marco checked his watch for the 20th time in an hour. The digital display showed 52 hours since Eli's descent into deep rock caverns. 2 scheduled check-ins missed, and the satellite tracker had stopped transmitting 8 hours ago. "Anything?" asked Dr. Layla Ortiz, the geologist who'd worked with Eli on numerous expeditions. Her voice echoed across the makeshift command center they'd established at the base camp. Marco shook his head, the dark circles under his eyes betraying his sleepless vigil. Last transmission placed him near the crossroads, then, nothing. He zoomed in on the digital map where Eli's tracker had last pinged. He mentioned investigating some kind of sound before the signal degraded. "Sound?" Layla frowned. "What kind of sound?" He described it as whispers. "Could be water movement, air currents through narrow passages." Marco trailed off, unwilling to voice the more troubling possibilities. By nightfall, what had begun as concern escalated into a full-scale emergency. The Arizona Cave Rescue Unit arrived with specialized equipment, and news vans from Phoenix lined the dusty access road. The disappearance of Eli Tanner, whose documentaries had introduced millions to the hidden worlds beneath their feet, was becoming national news. "Search teams are preparing to enter through 3 access points," announced Rita Delgado, the rescue coordinator, pointing to locations on the cave map. We've got thermal imaging, acoustic equipment, and enough supplies for a 5-day operation. A reporter thrust a microphone toward Rita. Is it true that 3 cavers died in these same caves last year? Rita's expression hardened. This is an active rescue operation. We're focused on bringing Mr. Tanner home safely. Behind the press cordon, a black SUV with tinted windows arrived. 2 men in business suits emerged, conferring briefly with a security guard wearing a Meridian Mining logo. I don't like this, Layla muttered to Marco. Meridian's been trying to limit access to the caves since they got the lease. They could hamper the search. By day 3, the story had exploded. Helicopter shots of the search base aired on national news, alongside clips from Eli's documentaries. Social media filled with #FindEliTanner posts. Environmentalists seized the moment to highlight the dangers of corporate exploitation of natural wonders. Inside the command center, the mood darkened with each passing hour. The first wave of rescuers had returned empty-handed. We followed his last known route and pushed half a mile beyond, reported Ben Halsey, lead rescuer, his face grimy with cave mud. Found some equipment markers he left, but no sign of him past the Crossroads Junction. What about the Western Passage? Marco asked, pointing to the direction where Eli had mentioned hearing whispers. Ben exchanged glances with his team. That's where it gets strange. There's evidence of a recent rockfall about a quarter mile in. Not a full collapse, but enough to require technical climbing to get past. Could Eli have triggered it? Layla asked. Possibly, Ben replied. But here's the thing, we found footprints on both sides. If he caused the fall, he somehow made it through. As day 4 dawned, media speculation turned grim. Experts debated survival times in cave environments. Psychologists analyzed the mental effects of prolonged darkness and isolation. A tearful interview with Eli's ex-wife revealed his decades-long obsession with deep rock caverns, and his belief that the caves held secrets connected to his father's disappearance. Inside Meridian's corporate headquarters, executives monitored the situation with growing alarm. The company issued a carefully worded statement expressing concern for Tanner and offering resources for the search, while simultaneously filing emergency motions to protect their proprietary geological data from being discovered during rescue operations. On day 5, as hopes dimmed, an unexpected development electrified the command center. We've got something, called a technician monitoring a specialized radio receiver. Faint signal from one of his emergency beacons. It's not his primary tracker, but it's definitely one of his backup devices. The coordinates placed the signal deep within an unmapped section of the cave, far beyond where any search team had ventured. That area isn't even on our surveys, said the Meridian representative, studying the map with sudden intensity. Our preliminary scans showed it was solid rock. Well, your scans were wrong, Rita replied, already organizing an elite rescue team. We're going in. As the team prepared to depart, Marco discovered something in Eli's research notes, a paragraph about local legends surrounding deep rock caverns. Indigenous stories told of people who entered the mountain and encountered those who lived between breaths, spirits who existed in the pauses between moments. More disturbing was an old newspaper clipping Eli had saved, a 1978 report about a student environmental activist who had vanished while protesting early exploration of the caves. What no one at the surface could know was that Eli Tanner was indeed alive, weakened but conscious, and that he had indeed found something in the darkness. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about deep rock caverns, and the true reason Meridian Mining was so desperate to control it. Eli's world had narrowed to the thin beam of his backup light. His main headlamp had failed 2 days ago, or was it 3? Time blurred in the eternal darkness. His satellite tracker lay crushed beneath the rockfall that had nearly taken his life, and the protein bars that should have lasted were down to the last 2. Yet none of that mattered anymore. Not since he'd heard it again, that whisper that had lured him away from his planned route. Clearer now, less like an acoustic trick and more like a voice. Hello? Eli called out, his own voice sounding foreign after so many hours of silence. The sound bounced off limestone walls, returning distorted. Then, startlingly clear. Here. I'm here. Eli froze. Not an echo. Not his imagination. A human voice, faint but unmistakable. He scrambled forward, his light beam dancing across the jagged passage. The tunnel narrowed until he had to crawl, sharp stones scraping against his back. Just as claustrophobia threatened to overwhelm him, the passage opened into a chamber unlike any he'd seen before. His light revealed a scene that stopped his breath, a makeshift camp of sorts, tattered backpack, empty water bottles, the remnants of energy bar wrappers. And against the far wall, half hidden in shadow, a figure. Don't! The figure rasped, raising a hand to shield eyes unaccustomed to even the weak light. Too bright. Eli immediately dimmed his light and moved closer, heart hammering. The figure was human, a woman, gaunt and filthy, with matted dark hair. But what shocked him most was the thick metal chain extending from a crude shackle around her ankle to an iron spike driven deep into the limestone floor. "My God!" Eli whispered, kneeling beside her. "Who are you? How did you get here?" The woman studied him with wary eyes that reflected the dim light like a nocturnal animal's. "You're not with them," she finally said. Not a question. "I'm Eli Tanner, cave researcher." He offered his water bottle, which she took with trembling hands. "Who did this to you?" "Nina Morales." Her voice strengthened slightly after drinking. "Environmental activist. Or I was. Now I'm a problem they solved." The name hit Eli like a physical blow. Nina Morales, the outspoken leader of Save Our Caves who had vanished 6 months ago during protests against Meridian mining. The official story was that she had fled pending charges of trespassing and property damage. "Everyone thinks you ran," Eli said, struggling to process the reality before him. "Or died," Nina finished flatly. "That was the point. Make the troublemaker disappear." She gestured to the chain. "They brought me here, left me to die slowly. Said it was poetic, the cave hugger becoming part of the cave." Eli examined the shackle, industrial grade, with a keyhole lock. The chain was fused into the rock itself, secured with some kind of industrial epoxy. "How have you survived?" he asked, noticing a small trickle of water running down one wall and collecting in a natural basin. "Water there. And they left food, enough to last a month, to prolong it." Her hollow laugh echoed in the chamber. "Didn't expect me to ration it to 6 months. Or to find cave crickets and bats." She gestured to crude drawings on the wall, tallies marking days. Eli unpacked his remaining supplies, spreading them before her. "I'll get you out of here," he promised. Nina's expression remained doubtful. "Chain needs bolt cutters, at minimum. Maybe a torch. And the way you came in? They collapsed it after leaving me. I heard the explosion. There must be another way you found." "There is," Eli confirmed. "But it's tight. I barely made it through with my pack." He examined the chain again, testing its strength. "I can't break this with what I have." A terrible realization dawned on him. He couldn't free her, and she couldn't travel through the narrow passage with the chain attached. His emergency beacon was transmitting, but there was no guarantee anyone would find them in time. "It's Meridian mining, isn't it?" Eli asked. "They found something here they don't want the world to know about." Nina nodded, pointing to a passage leading deeper into the cave. "Through there, a chamber with crystal formations unlike anything I've seen. But that's not all." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Those crystals? They're radioactive. Not dangerously so, but enough to be valuable. Rare earth elements, perfect for weapons development." Eli nodded grimly. "And if the environmental assessment found that? No permit. No mine. No billions in defense contracts." Nina finished. "Easier to discredit the activists by the permits and make problems disappear." "My beacon's active," Eli said. "But I don't know if the signal's reaching the surface." Nina's eyes widened. "They'll be looking for you. Everyone knows who you are. And they'll find both of us," Eli said with determination. But it could take days. I'm not leaving you alone again. For the first time, Nina's stoic expression cracked, revealing the months of terror and solitude behind it. Why would you stay? You could try to get help. Eli shook his head. Too risky. If I got lost or injured trying to get out, you'd die here alone. He arranged his pack as a makeshift pillow and placed it beneath her head. Besides, if they're looking for me, better to stay put. An unfamiliar noise echoed through the chamber. It took Eli a moment to recognize it as Nina's halting laughter. What's funny? He asked. 6 months alone, convinced I'd die here, she said. And now I'm having a conversation with the famous Eli Tanner. My thesis advisor used to make us watch your documentaries. Eli smiled despite everything. Let's focus on making sure you get to tell this story yourself. As his light dimmed to conserve battery, they sat together in the pale glow, two strangers united by darkness and truth, waiting for rescue or death, whichever found them first. 48 hours after finding Nina, Eli methodically crushed the shaft of his multi-tool against the limestone outcropping. Sparks flew as he struck the metal against stone, illuminating Nina's gaunt face in brief flashes of light. His primary light had failed completely, the backup flickered weakly, and he'd resorted to creating makeshift torches from fabric soaked in the small amount of lighter fluid he carried. You should conserve your energy, Nina said, watching him work in the dim light. They might not come for days. If they come at all. Eli muttered, then immediately regretted his pessimism. Sorry. They'll come. Marco knows approximately where I was headed. But not where you ended up, Nina pointed out. She shifted, the chain rattling as she moved closer to him. Despite her circumstances, her mind remained sharp. I've been thinking about the chamber I told you about, the one with the radioactive crystals. What if we use those? Some minerals glow under certain conditions. Eli paused his work. Phosphorescence. But we need an ultraviolet light source to charge them. Like this? Nina reached into a hidden pocket of her tattered jacket and produced a small UV flashlight. I use it for checking mineral specimens. Battery's probably dead, but... Eli took it, examining the corroded battery compartment. Worth a try. If I can transfer power from my backup light. The next few hours passed in focused work. While Eli rigged a power transfer to the UV light, Nina told him her story in greater detail. How she'd discovered evidence of radioactive elements while conducting independent testing of water samples near the cave, how she'd confronted Meridian executives with her findings, and how she'd been abducted during a solo hike to gather more evidence. They wanted to make it look like I'd abandoned the cause, she explained. Destroying my credibility so no one would follow up on my research. Eli nodded grimly. The perfect crime. No one searches for someone they believe chose to disappear. What about you? Nina asked. You could have at least tried to get back to the main passage. Why stay with a stranger? The question had been hovering between them since his decision. Eli paused his tinkering, considering his answer carefully. My father disappeared in these caves 20 years ago, he finally said. They never found him. I've always imagined him dying alone in the dark. His voice caught. I couldn't let that happen to you. Nina's eyes glistened in the dim light. I'm sorry about your father. Meridian was involved back then too, under a different name, Eli revealed. I've always suspected they knew more than they admitted. When they acquired the new lease, I knew I had to investigate. So this was personal for you, Nina said. Not just professional. It became personal for both of us, Eli replied, meeting her gaze. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared purpose that transcended their dire circumstances. They were no longer just two strangers thrown together by misfortune, but allies united against a common enemy. The makeshift UV light sputtered to life, casting an eerie purple glow. Eli carefully aimed it at the chain binding Nina's ankle, examining the lock mechanism. If I had acid or even salt water with enough current, he mused. You're thinking too complicated, Nina said. She pointed to where the chain connected to the rock wall. The epoxy they used, it's industrial, but it's still just glue. Extreme temperature changes might weaken it. Eli considered this. Hot and cold cycling. We have water, and if I can create enough flame. They worked through what felt like night, though time had lost all meaning in the perpetual darkness. Eli heated rocks in the flames of his makeshift torches, then quenched them with their precious water directly against the epoxy bonds. Again and again they repeated the process, watching for any sign of weakening. During the quiet moments between attempts, their conversations deepened, beyond survival, beyond their shared enemy. They spoke of the sacrifices they'd made for their causes, the relationships that had crumbled under the weight of their commitments, and the moments of transcendent beauty they'd witnessed in the natural world that made it all worthwhile. I lost my marriage to these caves, Eli admitted during one such lull. My ex-wife said I loved the darkness more than daylight. Nina's laugh was soft. My girlfriend said something similar when she left, that I loved trees more than people. She traced patterns in the cave dust. Maybe they were right. Or maybe we just recognize that some things are worth fighting for, even at great cost. Eli countered. And what happens when the fight is over? Nina asked. If we get out of here? When? Eli corrected firmly. When we get out. On what they estimated was the fourth day, they had a breakthrough. The epoxy binding one section of chain showed signs of cracking. Eli redoubled his efforts, focusing all their remaining resources on that spot. If we can free just this section, he explained, working feverishly, you can move farther. Maybe enough to reach the narrow passage. And then what? Nina asked, voicing the question they both avoided. I'm too weak to navigate those tunnels alone, and you know it. Eli met her eyes steadily. Then we wait together. My tracker is still transmitting. They'll find us. You really believe that? Nina said wonderingly. After everything you've seen, what people are capable of, you still have faith. Not in people, Eli clarified. In a few specific people. Marco. Layla. The rescue team. He wiped sweat from his brow. And now in you. As the epoxy continued to weaken, Eli felt an unexpected sense of peace descend. Whatever happened, rescue or a slower fate, he knew with absolute certainty that staying had been the right choice. Some acts of conscience required no justification beyond themselves. One more heat cycle, he told Nina, preparing their final torch. One more, and you might be free. The distant sound of rocks shifting froze Eli and Nina mid-conversation. They had been surviving on half rations for nearly a week, their voices now hoarse whispers in the darkness. The epoxy had weakened but not broken, their efforts hampered by dwindling supplies. Did you hear that? Eli breathed, extinguishing their precious flame. Nina nodded, her eyes wide in the darkness. Years of solitary confinement had sharpened her senses beyond normal limits. Movement. Multiple people. They listened intently as the sounds grew clearer, scraping equipment, muted voices, the distinctive clank of climbing gear against stone. They're coming from the western passage, Eli whispered, hope rising in his chest. That's the way I came in. Or it could be them. Nina countered, her voice tense. Meridian might have detected your beacon. Eli had considered this possibility during their long vigil. If it's Meridian, they'll want to silence both of us. If it's rescuers. He squeezed her hand. We need to make noise. Together, they shouted until their voices gave out, then began striking rocks against Nina's chain, creating a metallic rhythm that reverberated through the cavern. The response came quickly, a pattern of light flashes followed by a woman's voice calling Eli's name. Layla! Eli shouted back, relief flooding through him. We're here! We're trapped! The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Rescue workers equipped with powerful lights and specialized tools breached the final barrier, their beams piercing the chamber where Eli and Nina had spent their desperate days. My God! Breathed Rita Delgado, the rescue coordinator, as her light illuminated the scene. Eli, filthy and exhausted, sitting beside the chained woman that no one had seen for 6 months. She needs medical attention. Eli said immediately, shielding Nina's eyes from the sudden brightness. And bolt cutters. Heavy duty. The rescue team hesitated, cameras flashing as they documented the scene. The sight was surreal, not just the missing explorer they'd come to find, but a woman long presumed finished or fled, chained to the cave wall like a prisoner from another century. Nina Morales? One rescuer asked incredulously. The activist? Nina managed a weak smile. The one and only. Though I've been a bit tied up lately. Paramedics rushed forward while 2 team members attacked the chain with hydraulic cutters. The metal finally yielded with a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. For the first time in 6 months, Nina was free. As they prepared Nina for evacuation, Eli pulled Rita aside. There's more, he said urgently. Meridian Mining, they're the ones who did this. They're hiding something in these caves. Something radioactive. Rita's expression darkened. We know. Or at least, we suspected. There are 2 Meridian executives up top right now, trying to restrict our search areas. When we found your beacon signal coming from this unmapped section, they tried to claim it was too dangerous to enter. We need evidence, Eli insisted. Photos, samples. Already on it. Rita assured him, gesturing to team members who were systematically photographing everything. The chain, the makeshift camp, Nina's wall tallies. And there's something else you should know. There's a federal investigation into Meridian. Your disappearance accelerated things, brought attention. They've been watching the company for months. Outside the chamber, a commotion erupted. Raised voices, then the sound of someone being restrained. That would be the Meridian security team trying to interfere, Rita said grimly. They showed up with some story about being worried for your safety. Demanded to join the rescue party. But you didn't let them, Eli said. We had an anonymous tip, Rita revealed. Someone inside Meridian sent evidence about their involvement in Nina's disappearance. Suggested we keep the company representatives away from any rescue operation. The evacuation was carefully choreographed. Nina, now secured to a stretcher, would go first, accompanied by medical personnel. Eli would follow with the evidence team. The press is going crazy up there, one rescuer told them as they prepared to move. This story is exploding. Hero Explorer finds kidnapped activist is trending everywhere. Hero? Eli shook his head. I just followed the sound of her voice. You stayed, Nina corrected from her stretcher. When you could have left. That's what matters. As they began the slow journey toward daylight, Eli walked beside Nina's stretcher, his hand occasionally steadying it over rough terrain. Cameras flashed at each junction where rescue team members had established relay points. The images captured would soon become iconic. Eli Tanner, the renowned explorer, emerging from darkness with a woman the world had forgotten. When they finally reached the cave entrance, the assault of sensations was overwhelming. Sunlight burned their cave-adapted eyes. The cacophony of voices, reporters, rescue workers, protesters who had gathered in solidarity, crashed over them like a physical wave. Through squinted eyes, Eli saw the chaos that awaited them. News helicopters circled overhead. Police held back crowds. And there, being led away in handcuffs, were 2 Meridian executives, their corporate composure crumbling under the weight of flashing police lights. They're charging them already? Eli asked in disbelief. The FBI had been building a case for months, explained an agent who appeared at his side. Your discovery of Ms. Morales was the final piece. We have enough to bring conspiracy charges at minimum. As medical personnel transferred Nina to an ambulance, she caught Eli's gaze one last time. No words were needed, the silent promise between them was clear. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward Eli as he blinked in the harsh sunlight. Mr. Tanner! How did you find Nina Morales? Did you know she was alive? What happened down there? Eli raised a hand for silence, his explorer's instinct for storytelling taking over despite his exhaustion. The world wanted answers, and he would give them, but not the superficial narrative they expected. What happened? He began, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed crowd. is that corporate greed nearly buried the truth. But some truths refuse to stay hidden, no matter how deep you chain them. 3 months after the rescue, Eli Tanner stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., cameras flashing as he prepared to testify before a committee on environmental protection. The room fell silent as he adjusted the microphone, his explorer's tan faded from weeks of indoor meetings and depositions. "Gentlemen and ladies of the committee," he began, his voice steady. "What happened at Deep Rock Caverns wasn't just a crime against one woman. It was an attempt to silence scientific truth for corporate profit." In the front row, Nina Morales watched him, her once gaunt face now restored to health, though her eyes still carried shadows of her ordeal. Beside her sat Marco, Layla, and the core members of the rescue team that had become an extended family in the aftermath of their discovery. The months following their emergence from the cave had been a whirlwind. Nina's medical recovery had been matched by an equally intense legal battle, as Meridian Mining deployed armies of lawyers to counter the federal charges. But the evidence was overwhelming, not just of Nina's imprisonment, but of systematic environmental fraud and corruption that stretched back decades. What the media initially dubbed the Cave Miracle quickly evolved into the Meridian Mining Scandal, as whistleblowers emerged from within the company. The radioactive rare earth elements that Nina had discovered were indeed valuable, worth billions on the defense contract market, but their extraction would have poisoned groundwater supplies for 3 counties. "I'm not a lawyer," Eli continued, glancing at his notes. "I'm a scientist who follows evidence. And the evidence shows that our current penalties for environmental crimes are treated as acceptable business costs by corporations like Meridian. Mr. Tanner, you've become quite the celebrity since your rescue of Ms. Morales. Some might suggest you're exploiting this incident for publicity." Before Eli could respond, Nina rose from her seat, her voice ringing clear. "With respect, Mr. Tanner could have left me to die and saved himself. Instead, he chose to risk everything for a stranger. If that's your definition of publicity seeking, perhaps we need more of it in Washington." The room erupted in applause, forcing the committee chairman to bang his gavel for order. Outside the arena, public support had transformed into action. Crowdfunding campaigns for legal fees gave way to a nationwide movement to protect vulnerable cave systems. Eli had leveraged his newfound platform ruthlessly, redirecting interview requests to focus on environmental protection rather than the sensational aspects of the rescue. "The real hero of this story isn't me," Eli told the committee, nodding toward Nina. "It's the woman who survived 6 months in darkness rather than let the truth be buried. And it's every citizen who's demanded accountability since." The hearing stretched into evening, with both Eli and Nina delivering testimony that would later be credited with strengthening the Cave Protection Act of 2026. As they exited the Capitol building together, reporters swarmed, but security kept them at bay, a small courtesy arranged by sympathetic officials. "You didn't have to defend me in there," Eli said as they walked toward their waiting car. Nina smiled, the expression still sometimes looking unfamiliar on her face after so many months of solitude. "Partners watch each other's backs. Isn't that what you taught me in the dark?" Their partnership had evolved in unexpected ways. The shared trauma could have driven them apart once the immediate danger passed. Instead, it had forged a connection that neither could fully explain to outsiders. They weren't romantic partners. Their wounds were still too fresh, their causes too demanding, but they were something more than friends or colleagues. 2 weeks later, they stood together at the entrance to Deep Rock Caverns, now surrounded by National Park Service signs and rangers. The official dedication ceremony for the Morales Tanner Preserve had drawn hundreds of supporters, environmental activists, and media. "I never thought I'd come back here," Nina admitted quietly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. "We don't have to stay long," Eli assured her. "Just long enough to make it official." She shook her head. "No, it's important that I'm here. That everyone sees this place is no longer something to fear." The Interior Secretary approached the podium, signaling the start of the ceremony. "Today, we dedicate not just a geological wonder, but a testament to human courage and our commitment to protecting natural treasures for future generations." As the speeches continued, Eli noticed Nina's gaze fixed on the cave entrance. "Are you seeing it again?" he asked softly. She nodded. They had spoken often of the psychological aftermath, the nightmares, the moments when darkness felt suffocating rather than familiar. "But it's different now," she said. "I'm choosing to look at it." When their turn came to speak, they approached the podium together. The applause washed over them as Eli stepped back, gesturing for Nina to take the lead. "Many of you have asked why I don't hate this place," she began, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "The truth is, the cave never imprisoned me, people did. The darkness never lied to me, corporations did." She placed her hand on the ceremonial plaque. "What tried to bury me has instead become my foundation." After the ceremony, as the crowds dispersed, Eli and Nina lingered at the observation platform overlooking the valley. Below them, the visitor center construction was already underway, with plans for educational exhibits about cave conservation and the scandal that had nearly destroyed this natural wonder. "What happens now?" Eli asked, echoing the question Nina had posed to him in the darkness months before. Nina smiled, breathing deeply of the free air. "Now we keep going. Different caves, same mission." She turned to him. "I heard Ecuador has some unmapped systems under threat from mining interests." Eli laughed. "Are you seriously suggesting another expedition already? Why not? This time I'll bring extra chains," she deadpanned. "Just in case we need to restrain any corporate executives we find along the way." As the sun set over what would forever be known as the Morales Tanner Preserve, they walked together toward the future, no longer just survivors, but guardians of the depths that had both tested and transformed them.